Okay, here it is. You actually own the Chinese government. Right? I mean, it must have been a month.
Anybody, does my retainer go up?
Hey, like this. Yes. Did you hear this? It was us. Right?
Coming through.
Rick Madison, 1 foot off center. You know what? This part of the week when we enjoy it, we do. And if you can hit subscribe, and for a lot of people, that is their best way of protesting without getting locked up or your bank account seized. Right? So isn't that wonderful? Jeff Cox, of course, and we have a lot to cover today. I did want to talk about. The other day, I was renewing my gun license.
Oh.
So I have restricted, non-restricted, and I was going through, so you need to give a blood sample, a social insurance number. You need to sign in through your bank account login to make sure it's secure. And I remember thinking, I wonder which page the gang members would be tripped up on. Page 1 or page 2? I think they go, house address. Well, I did a home invasion once. Does that count? So anyway, that gun renewal process is very, it's time consuming, it's arduous, it's multi-leveled, and to keep everybody safe, of course. I just find it interesting that we want to ban all those things.
So I've talked about this before. I don't have a dog in this fight. I get it. So I'm interested. That's new. That process is new that you went through this year. Yeah. And again, I if you look at any of the challenges this country's had around guns, and it's had quite a bit as of late, more so Vancouver, Toronto. Obviously, there was a very significant incident on the East Coast just a year and a bit ago, but all done with illegal guns, right? So that's the part that makes no sense, and it's typical spin. And in fact, this was the pressure that was put on the RCMP when they were trying to push this gun registry in, which then came to light that was being done. We're not America. There's no right to bear arms here, but we are a vast land that is arguably not urban, although our cities continue to grow. And the reality is, hunting is part of our heritage, and hunting involves guns. And I think safe gun owners have a right to have a gun. I also have only, this is the irony of it all. I've actually only considered purchasing a gun in the past 2 years.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. Because I have serious concerns. And again, you can call me a tin hat. It's not, but I, for the first time in my life, have serious concerns about where our government's going. So, if there was ever like a civil uprising, I don't want to be standing there with a hammer. And that's the reality. And I mean, if I acted on it, no. Will I? Probably not. But again, I don't.
It's something you think about,
right? Yeah. And again, I'm not. I've said this before, right? Like I'm gonna puke. I voted for the Liberals in 2015 because I thought change was needed, and then here I am 7 years later talking about putting a gun locker in my crawl space for the day that they come for my children. Like, that's insanity, right? So I'm not a Mad Max supporter here. I'm looking for some central government, and I'm going, I might need to get a couple of semi-automatics just in case they send in the government or send in the military. The good news is they're not funding the military, so I'm not sure who they're going to send. Hello, it's Chrystia Freeland here. Come out of your house. It's the Wicked Witch of the East, actually, because she's not really welcome out here. Yeah. So,
but with her financial background, it just makes sense. Actually, and I want people to Google that. Her background in finance and in anything involving numbers, it's mystifying because you bring up a word, insanity. So the other day, I was talking to a landscaper friend who owns a company, and he found out about a federal grant that he can get $17,000 from the government to hire somebody, and they say it, but they don't say it, under the age of 25.
Yeah.
So he says which is great if I could find someone. So we were just talking back and forth about how incredible it was that they're offering this grant with zero boots on the ground to realize that we're in a labor shortage. So maybe the money that we could use to hire people that aren't there, we could use for training and attracting immigrants and doing something, that would actually have an impact on the economy. So I found it interesting that we get into this conversation about these woefully inadequate programs where they stand in the House and they go, we are doing more for Canadians. It's a question about interference, but we're doing more for Canadians. And he does the thing with the fingers. We're doing more for Canadians, and we will continue to do more for Canadians and climate change. And you just want to.
So, and I want to come back because I have a question about the gun thing, but I'll go there for a second. So I got a young son and another one. I got to keep my phone on. Could be going into labor any minute. So young family. Daycare is a falsity where we live. It's almost impossible to get into. So we've had to go the route of bringing someone into our house, and we're trying to do this correctly and above board. So we are looking at the only place that we can find someone, and that's to essentially sponsor a foreign worker to come in and work with the kids. We've identified a lady who has some ties to Canada that is Mexican, and we're going through the process with her to try and get her to Canada. We're in month 4. And we've been given conditional approval and got told by the lawyer that we're probably 7 months out. So my kids are going to be in university by the time this woman is approved to come work for my family. I don't get it. So she's got a master's in child education, and again, she has Canadian values. If again, just in her cultural background, they're very aligned with Canadian values. She's got 3 of her own kids. She has a husband who's a forensic accountant. This is not unskilled labor, and she lives in Mexico City and struggles with some very, very serious stuff that we all know is going on down there, and said, I'm in a time in my life where I can do this and want to do this. Phenomenal woman. Love to have her work for my family, but essentially the process is a year, thousands of dollars to this point to make it happen. Bizarre. So hang on. So I want to know, do you have any guns that you've had to turn in?
So they have a little caveat there, which says, here's a list of the guns that currently are identified as prohibited. I luckily do not, because I have friends in law enforcement that keep me abreast of these things. And plus the fact is, I'm a sportsman, so I go to the Fish and Game Club and do that. I don't do any hunting. It's just because I'm the cooler. Like if I go hunting with you, you will not get anything. Like that's what I do. And on a fishing boat, the fish are safe, like everything. So it's interesting to me is that, as I go forward with these gun regulations, like maybe there's a lot of Canadians like me. It took a friend that's into guns to say, Rick, you have this gun. I'm like, oh, okay, because part of me goes, I just want to shoot targets. I want to have fun with my son. That's all I want to do. Right. And so the identifiers, like if you look at the list, the identifiers, people go, well, don't you know what kind of guns you have? Yeah, kind of. I do. Yeah. And I'm a responsible gun owner, but I mean, their list, and that's the thing is we have people making those laws that actually I saw them being asked, do you know what these guns are? Do you know what they do? Have you ever had it? Is there any kind of experience there? And they fundamentally say, no, I don't.
Yeah, and listen, I get that part of it. I'm not. I think people would go, oh, this guy's got a gun. Maybe. But I think an example. Listen, you obviously know the rules and how to be safe and how to use it and how to store it and how to move it. I mean, this happens to me quite regular. I like toys too, and people say, oh, that's a. That boat's got this engine in it. And I'm like, yep. And they're like, or is it this one? And I'm like, Guys,
It's front wheel drive.
turn the key. Yeah, like I'm like, it looks shiny, right? And there are people that are very, very, very meticulous about these things, and they're like, the year it was built, and they go into the details. I'm not that person, so I understand that. I don't think that makes you an irresponsible gun owner. I get what you're saying, right? I mean, lots of people say, oh, that's a nice car. Cool. After that, that's it. I bought it because it's a nice car. I'm not buying it because it's a straight 6 with this and that.
Good on you for knowing what a straight 6 kind of is.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
No, but it's true. And what I'm saying is, let me be clear. Do I know what guns I have? Yes. But when you look at the list, I think for a lot of people it would be daunting. It would be overwhelming. And again, it goes back to the renewal process. I mean, I went through this process. I had to have my spouse present. And there's lots of questions about your background. Are you unstable at all? Have you had any therapy sessions? Like anything basically puts a mark on your record saying we will probably take your guns if any of these things are flagged. So it's a bit frustrating because I know a lot of people at that fishing game club, it's part of their life. It's part of their hobby. They're into it. It's a passion. And I just feel bad for the people that own gun stores that have been curtailed with inventory, what you can sell, constantly shifting targets. COVID, anyone? and just like there's all this stuff that has been basically pushing them into bankruptcy. And I feel bad for them.
When legal gun ownership is not the issue in Canada. Bottom line.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I think as a Canadian citizen, you can say that out loud, and I don't think anybody's going to dispute that.
But that's the constant, again, liberal spin is they're always using one thing to pander to another, right? It's the minute you speak out about carbon tax, you're just some bigot, destroy the planet. It's like, well, hang on a second. You're taxing most of the country at 20% on all levels. Well, we can hardly afford to live, and you're not reducing emissions. I actually was thinking about this on the weekend. I'm totally, now I'm going off on a tangent, but the reality is, like, listen, I could probably stomach the carbon tax if they said, here's the billions of dollars we're taking for this carbon capture project in the Arctic. I would criticize it, but at least I would feel like, oh, you're not just lining your pockets, right? Yeah. To fund some low crap that I have no interest in, like going on vacation in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, and that's the other thing is, and we talk a lot. There's so many things that are really trigger words on this show. One is insanity. But a word that was used by a friend of mine the other day is he said, I'm not really an activist in any regard. And he says, I'm actually activated now. He said the word activated. He says, I've read enough of the news, and he says, I never used to get into the deep dive on this stuff, but he says, it's finally becoming apparent. And that's part of the reason why we started this was we became more and more disenfranchised. Yep. I think that would be a nice soft way of saying we were fundamentally upset with what was going on. But, and we'll get into some other stuff too, but 30% of people, if you were to have an election tomorrow, would vote Liberal.
Yeah.
I believe that, and I'm...
And 28% NDP,
which is just it's alarming, and again, it's that party line. Like, yep. I vote for the names that make sense to me that I heard around the dinner table when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know what else Trudeau may or may not want to do to start telling people, like, listen, this guy is not right.
Right.
He's
in the head.
Yeah, well, really arrogant, entitled, Laurentian elite. But all that aside, which is a lot, he's still a bad manager of Canadian monetary policy and a whole bunch of other things. So anyway, we're going off a little bit on a tangent. Let's talk a bit about this one thing that may or may not stick to him, the Teflon boy, which is the Michael Chong.
Yeah, and I think this is the scary part for me with where the Liberal Party is at is like, so we have a very serious problem in this country right now with essentially the Chinese who have really infiltrated Canada on multiple levels. And the Liberal spin is the minute you start talking about this, you're a racist. What? No. No. First of all, that has to be dismissed right away. But that's their spin. The reality is, in the past number of years, we have seen and now understand that China has really infiltrated society. And again, this is why it's not racism. They are pressuring Chinese Canadians or expats that are now here. They have opened Chinese police stations in our communities to drag people in and try and pressure them into a number of things, from simplistic stuff along the way that they're speaking in this country, to as extreme as trying to get them forced back onto planes to be held accountable for undemocratic things back in China. I mean, that in itself is nuts. Then to find out this week that a sitting MP's family in not just Canada but China has in some form been threatened, and he was unaware of it. Again, that's crazy.
Trudeau was unaware of it.
That's what he claims. But Michael Chong was unaware. I mean, again, even Michael Chong unknowing. And if I see one more Twitter comment about he didn't know his family was being threatened, suspect, like. Again, there's the extremist of it, right? Like, we're talking about a Canadian citizen and a human being and people that are associated with them. Can we try and not be partisan about this? For can we pull together and say this is not about liberals or conservatives and about are you serious right now? This is actually happening. I think. I don't think you have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, okay, wait a second. We have Chinese police states in Canada. We have threats being placed on sitting MPs. Mm-hmm. We have reports that elections have been essentially. I'm not going to say rigged because that's the wrong word, but elections. There has been pressure in elections, so influence within elections in mm-hmm. Canada by the Chinese. And then you have a foundation that's supposed to be doing good in the name of our Prime Minister's father, who is taking money from people that are associated with all these things, and they're not connected. That's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, you don't have to be Inspector Gadget to put this.
Well, to be fair, though, it's just the brother of the Prime Minister.
Who wants to speak?
And aren't they estranged? I don't know.
They were. In fact, he shit-talked his brother not 3 months ago on Twitter and told him it's time to go. So I find it extremely interesting. I mean, again, in the Trudeau Foundation. So did you see that, like, extremely damning evidence from, I guess she would be the ED, the executive director, who essentially said, whoa, when she found out this was going on. She said, we need to do a very transparent deep dive into this, mm-hmm. and got pressured by the board and said not a chance in hell, and that's when she resigned. Did you see her testimony?
No, I didn't.
It was like make your stomach turn sickness. Yeah.
So I want to unpack everything you just said, but the other part that gets me. Just from that whole standpoint of, so let me get this straight. The Chinese government is helping propel the liberal government. Like, they're really fundamentally helping to influence people to vote liberal.
To be fair, I don't know. Like, on the surface, yes, but they actually have help the Liberals, but also help the Conservatives. Sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly.
With the MP.
So the intention here is by the Chinese, from the understanding, is to keep our country in chaos. And so our country sits in chaos in a minority government. So their goal is first and foremost to have anybody that speaks out against the Chinese removed. So we've seen that happen a handful of times. And they do a very good job of it on WeChat. So the reason most Canadians would be like, well, why don't we see this? It's because it's very much in a silo of Chinese immigrants and their communication and their lines of news, which is not always the National Post. Mm-hmm. So the goal is to keep the country essentially in a minority government. That is the goal. What we do know is that there was a Liberal that was very aware of what was going on, multiple now, and they did nothing about it. But for the record, it's not always just one. It's more about a state of chaos, which is their goal.
So it's all about distraction and fundamentally a minority government, as you're aware, it does create a lot of different pressures. It doesn't have a firm hand, I guess, on the world stage.
Yep.
There's a whole bunch of things that fall off of that.
Yeah.
Essentially.
But you are right. I mean over the past number of years it has played in the Liberals' favor.
So would you, because again, I'm just trying to, with this amount of information that CSIS would probably be aware of as well, of course, that's probably why there's a little bit of disconnect, I would think, happening right now with CSIS and the federal government.
But you got to think. Listen, CSIS is leaking like a sieve right now. I mean, it is a boat with a hole in it, and for obvious reasons. They have obviously lost all trust in the PMO's office, and so week after week, after Justin Trudeau comes out and says, and all of his cronies come out and say, the Green zealot there, Jerry Butts, who claims to not have any role in government, although seems to have a huge effect these days, or Stephen, or Chrystia Freeland, whoever it is like, CSIS is going about, this has to stop, right? Well, obviously somebody inside CSIS said, we've presented this and it was supposed to be acted on and it's not being acted on, so we're just going to continue to slip it to the Globe and Mail. That's the reality of what's happening, right? And so my assumption in this, and again, I don't think this is not tin hat. This is like effectively CSIS most likely came to the current government and said, we have a huge problem, and they said, oh, thanks, and did nothing about it.
Because wasn't there was recommendations created for the PMO's office saying these are some very valid concerns we have with meddling in elections, essentially, and then they chose to ignore like the top level, which was create policy around these recommendations.
And I think this is where, because again, will Katie? So then, who is the next to go down for the Teflon Don? Right? Like, will it be Katie Telford? Will he bob and weave again and chuck another very strong woman underneath the bus to save his own ass? That's the question.
Well, and that's the part that I'm having trouble with is again, a lot of I love reading the forums. I love what people are saying. I love the comments, and people go, how many times does the hand have to be in the cookie jar? And they say that metaphorically before somebody goes, oh, can you just stop? And it seems to be an ever increasing acceleration of incidents. Now, again, we have the Chinese police stations, which again, convenience stores, laundromats, what have you, but those are well documented. Like they're fundamentally operating within Canada's borders,
and we're being told by the RCMP and by the government that they're being disbanded, but it's being reported through social media from the Chinese communities in Canada that are pro-Canada that they're not, that there's very much still there and very much still applying the pressures that they were before.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about Sacha Trudeau, because something you said made a lot of sense. So he's asked for his brother to step down, like get out of there. I mean, you've done enough harm to the family, or has he? Because I think his wealth has increased exponentially while he's been in office, which is something else entirely. But Sacha Trudeau, would he be the one that fundamentally topples the House of Trudeau?
I don't think so. I don't think he's got the weight. And right now he's coming to his brother's aid. I mean, this is not he's claiming that what the headline I read last night was that it was a reputable donor. And that was his going to be, or his testimony related to the Trudeau Foundation's $240,000 that they took from essentially the Communist Party of China through a business front.
Okay, so
reputable donor. I don't know how you say that 6 weeks into this scandal. Your question though was, why would this one stick and others not?
Yeah.
And the answer in my eyes is there's a third component to this that's not existed in other scandals, right? So you have the graft and you have the money. So you have the grease in every other, we charity, it's my buddies, let's give them $900 million, right? SNC-Lavalin, Quebec-based, who cares about their record abroad? We're going to take care of them. My Trudeau's vacations, what? Well, I didn't know that I couldn't go to the island of a major donor, right? And that would look bad.
They're family friends.
Yeah. That's just grease, and it frustrates me and it frustrates you. But I think for the general public, they go, that's politicians. It's unfortunate, but I think that's where it is.
Yep.
I think the key to this one that's fundamentally different is you are talking about physical threats. We're not talking about money anymore, although it's a piece of it, like it is in every other Liberal scandal, money and graft. But now you're talking about a threat to a Canadian from a foreign government, and I think that's the day that Canadians fundamentally go, I don't condone the rest, but I'm like, I expect it. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the line where people say no. So if this comes to light, and again, I just find it mind blowing that the amount of people that are trying to make this Michael Chong's problem, and I do hope for his sake and others that this story isn't overblown by the Conservatives, and although I never want to hear the story, but I really hope they are keeping their feet on the ground and being open and honest about this and saying, like, we didn't know, this is not cool, and this is not good. I think that's the difference. I don't think in the past there's been that component, and I think that's why this one sticks.
But then there was the two Michaels story, which was also the same thing. There was a physical threat because they were in captivity.
Yep.
And it was...
Leave them there.
Yeah, leave them there because it looks better on us if actually they don't get released right away.
Yeah. So I think that's all. I think this is in this. But again, I think this is all wrapped up in the same story. And again, I would love somebody to look at this entire last 15-minute conversation and say, oh, that's tin hat. None of that's connected. I mean, come on, this is crazy, right? So I think the difference with the Michaels, although there really is no difference, is I think people go, listen, there's no question to me that the Michaels were not there on business. I think they are. I think they very much work for the state, and I'm okay with that. Yep. That is what it is. So I don't think you just had. I don't think you just had two guys on vacation that were apprehended and thrown in jail. Let's be honest. They are spies or were spies for the Canadian government, and this is the spy game that we play across the world. So again, I think there Canadians go, now, do we want them home? Yes. I think when you hear that the Liberals said, no, leave them there for now, we actually don't want them released, it probably will play into the favor of the Conservatives. Yeah, that's not cool. And I think it's all wrapped up in the same component.
So we have the money trail, we have harm to an elected sitting MP, and yet it still feels like, again, I don't know how at some point, and I see this in all the threads and all the forums. People keep saying, how on earth is this guy still in office? Like he can't possibly still manage to stay there. Right. And yet, like, and again, you and I have shared this, the amount of insanity, there's that word again, that we see continually when it comes to the Trudeau government. But then, speaking of insanity, the Trudeau Foundation, when it took that bribe, that donation, whatever you want to call it, they said, well, actually, we kind of knew that it was from the Chinese government, but we thought we'll take their money and then we'll manipulate them.
Yeah, that was the spin last night. Yeah.
See, we were actually more in control than a lot of people think. Like, we actually have our hand on the wheel. What? And it's going to be fine. In fact, we are sending them notes and they're probably reading them right now. Like, can you understand? Like, that sense of arrogance is mind blowing to me.
I would have loved to be in the room whenever PR firm that's been hired to try and clean this up was like, "We got it. Are you ready? Here's what's coming."
Gary's got it. Go, Gary.
Go, Gary.
Gary, whiteboard this.
Okay, here it is. You actually own the Chinese government, right? I mean, it must have been a month.
Is my retainer go up?
Hey, like this. Yes. Did you hear this? It was us, right? Where was that 2 months ago? I mean, it's at you. If we are sitting here doing a show in September and we are not talking about election, God save us.
Oh, will the show die when Trudeau gets ousted out of office?
No, listen, I'm on this bent this week, and again, I think I really believe that to do this, you never want to be Fox News, okay? And so, or CNN for that matter,
yeah,
or CBC, which is actually more extreme than either of those in Canada. I said this week. Listen, I love Pierre. I think he's hilarious. I think he's the right guy at the right time. If he delivers on his messaging, I'm sign me up. Where do I sign up? I'm telling you right now, as a friend, it's time to shift your messaging. You know, I've heard it. We talked about it in the last show. I continue to hear it. People are tired and done with what he's doing, and they're looking for some shift and hope and time for change. And I was telling you this. Rick Mercer phoned in yesterday, or Sashi Capelli, I think, interviewed him. I was listening to the Syndicate show. And he said, "Listen," and I mean, Rick's Rick, but I enjoy him. And he said, I was watching a clip of Pierre this week, and he was at the Spring Festival. I think it's a Spring Harvest Festival, which I think is a Punjabi festival. And anyway, he turned to the MP that's in the riding. They said, "Well, what's this festival called?" Kind of facetiously. Oh, and he delivers them the Spring Harvest Festival. And he goes, "The Harvest Festival, but we can't harvest because Justin Trudeau took all our seeds." And Rick's like, "Come on, man. First of all, half the country is covered in snow. We're not harvesting anything right now. And second, enough is enough." And listen, I'm saying it as a huge supporter. Shift your messaging. It's time to look forward. We all know he's a donkey. You're doing a very good job reminding us of that. You've got to shift into a leadership role. Right now, you're a little bit of the class clown throwing punches from the back, and they're funny, and I enjoy them. And I think for political junkies, I mean, there's nothing more fun than for
These
me.
Wonderful sound bites, no question.
When I get on Twitter at 9:00 at night and I'm like, okay, this will be this. I'll say this. I do two things now. I always like to watch, what Pierre did in the House. And then I love to read the comments under anything Jagmeet Singh tweets. Have you ever done that? Like, dude, it is another level. I mean, there's some racist stuff, which is sad. And it's like, really, are we there as a country? I hope not. I never want to see that. But the comments, there are some comedians out there that have never been found, and they get on him, and there's absolutely no support. There will be 400 comments, and you will not find one supporter, and they just go up and down him. It's genius.
So the part though that is interesting to me is when you have someone like Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet, any one of those. Okay, so you have these. And let's say you work in a company where these people that you work with, they steal from the till, they upset customers, they even have horrible ideas about women, and they break stuff constantly. They actually shut the doors when they shouldn't to outside business. Like, they do a whole bunch of things wrong. So you see that, and you're a caring, empathetic individual, and you're like, that's not right. That's not right. Whoa, that's way offside. That should get you fired. And yet this person still bumbles around, incompetent clown. And doesn't it? And again, the primary role of opposition is to hold the government accountable. Right. It would take every fiber of self-control to not light that clown up every day. Like, to stand across and just go, okay, so we have a full list here today. I'm kind of wondering, like, and I'm a sarcastic individual, but I would say it would be almost impossible for me because, again, I would take the opportunity at every turn to say, you're a horrible person. From an optics standpoint, humanity, like, you're not a decent human being. Nope. There's so many levels I would light you up. And again, I want to be prime minister. I want to run the country better because it would be easy because you've done every bad decision. If there is one, you made it. And it would be tough for me not to be critical constantly of this employee, this coworker that I work with who is doing all these things wrong. Like, it would be really tough for me not to go, I want to tell the world how bad you are.
Yeah. And I get it. And it's why he does what he does. All I'm suggesting is from a public perception, I think he needs to change his messaging. I'm with you. Listen, and you're right. It's on a silver platter. The two of them. I mean, Trudeau. Listen. You forget. You have Trudeau and you have Jagmeet. I mean, those two are just. You're right. I would wake up every day and say, "Oh, here we go." Like, it's just rolling my shoulders, right? Like, I can be harsh with my tongue. I would have a lot of fun there, right? But imagine it's the supporting cast. Like, anytime, Mendocino stands up. I mean, I don't think he knows how to spell his own name, right? Chrystia Freeland is I'm just waiting. Like, are you a Star Wars fan?
Yes.
Like,
May the Fourth be with you. Yeah.
Like I'm just waiting for her to turn into the Emperor. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the face is, I'm like, she really is Senator Palpatine. I'm just waiting for her to make that shift to the Emperor, right? I think again, Omar Al-Ghrabi. I mean, the guy, he's Steve Urkel, first of all. Like no one else. Like, I'm like, this is I'm reliving. I'm watching the news, reliving my Friday nights as an 8-year-old, right? Like, Family Matters was the show.
But again, like, and again, it's a host of characters that you watch them and you go, how on earth do I not criticize this party that is thrust in front of me? Like what fertile ground this is. Speaking of harvests, to like, every day you would have a harvest of comments, sound bites, and the other part is we're in a media, and of course you and I utilize this as well. TikTok, like these short sound bites, right. These sound clips. That's the world we live in.
Okay, I agree with you, and I don't. You got to be very. I want to walk a very fine line here. I'm not talking about.
We do that here.
I try.
We go try. 1 foot off.
1 foot off. Still very close to center. So I think it's people will be frustrated with this analogy. All I'm suggesting is when Barack Obama came into power, I mean, you want to talk about a donkey. And I think I think this is hilarious. I mean, when George W. Bush was at the end, it was like you thought it was the end of America, right? And now we're actually looking back going, he was pretty good. What? But the reality is, there was a perfect example. All I'm asking Pierre to do is take a little bit of rock. Like, if it was the easy road is to stay on the road you're on. The harder road is to climb up to the higher road. For a bad cliche, I'm just saying, I think it's time to change your messaging. Mm-hmm. It's time to start focusing on where we're going to go and not what we're going to do. Sometimes silence is the best way to take it.
Yeah, and I think the other part, if Pierre, when you see this, as I know you're a subscriber, is maybe don't, and again, this is the same thing I would do. He smirks sometimes because he knows he has so many places to go with this leader who continually trips over himself.
Well, and I think for some people it makes them look smug.
And that's the other part is, and again, if the only way I would say is Trudeau has better hair because Pierre put some product in his hair, of course, and I think it's stern. It looks more stern than other. Like, I do the same thing because he just can't do a thing with this thing. But
at least you got something to put in.
But I mean,
put product in.
But I mean, and I'm being slightly facetious, but the other part is, in certain women, and I'm not saying all women, but they might look at that and go, he looks better on television. Yep. And he's, you know what? yeah, he goes to donors' places and he does all these other things. But, that's just noise. That's politicians. And you know what? Sometimes, like, people say Stephen Harper lost because he didn't present well on that TV screen. And as part of that.
And arguably he didn't. And I think that's a lesson Pierre's got to learn, is you got to be very careful with the smiles and how they're presented. You are being criticized by your cover, not by the content of your book. It's unfortunate, but it's the reality. So what about, Alberta's going to the polls. I don't know how close you follow this. You're an Albertan.
No, I have lots of friends back there, and I talk to somebody from Alberta every day. Rachel Notley versus Daniel Smith.
Yep.
And I think for the most part, Edmonton is oddly enough in the NDP camp.
It's a lock. But it has been. That's not new.
But because they're all government workers and that sort of thing. And they like Rachel because she looks after them, and that's good. But Daniel Smith, I think, has resonated with Calgarians in the rural, which if there's enough of them, of course, I think there's going to be a lot of people that will be vocal in their support and will push towards that change. But you do have an oil town in Calgary, which know that Daniel Smith will actually send a message to Ottawa versus Rachel Notley, who would be, I think, a lot more quieter with that and just look after a lot of contracts and various things, but she wouldn't be a firebrand that I think Daniel Smith is.
So, I mean, late last week they were calling it the arena election. They believe the Calgary that the Calgary Flames' new arena may be the deciding factor, and I would suggest you would be crazy to not get behind keeping that team in Calgary, and to do that you're going to have to build an arena, and Notley's saying no. So do you think it has an effect?
Well, as a tried and true Calgary Flames supporter, and when I bleed red. But it is one of those things where I think that one might be a push for me. I don't know if I would have said those same things, which is, and I know she's trying to, activate the Calgary Flames fan base, which is huge. I just don't know if I would go there, like make it about an arena. I think that diminishes the larger scope of what the province has to look for, which is a whole host of other things that are probably higher on the agenda.
Yeah. You're a diehard Calgary Flames fan. I was born in 1980, and my uncle was from Edmonton, so my first memories are being in a Gretzky jersey, right? So I'm a diehard Oilers fan. So I've been really focused on them in the playoffs. Are you guys doing well? I'm just not paying much attention besides the Oilers series. So are you up next with us? Or I can't remember.
You know what, though? I will say this. Sutter was fired. and I did love the man until he didn't remember the young up-and-coming player's number and he was being dismissful with a very good player. And I think that's when the Calgary Flames senior management ownership group says, listen, the old guard has to go. We have a new player. We have to talk to them. We have to be better. And Sutter, I don't think, fit that mold.
And change is inevitable. I think Sutter, he will reemerge. I mean, I find it amazing when you look in that first round of the playoffs, the amount of good coaches that have, again, been in and out of Edmonton that are now in LA as an example, or, Paul Maurice, who was in Winnipeg, who's now in Florida. Listen, Sutter's going to find his I don't think we have to worry about him by any means, but again, he'll end up in a big job. So.
His new contract, which is $4 million a year, pays out in the next couple of years. So, listen, Jeff Cox, thank you again for the time, and again, if you can, this maybe it might get your bank accounts frozen because you can't protest in Canada, but hit subscribe. We'd sure love it, and that's the best way to support the cause.
At least before we're canceled under the.
We'll totally get canceled.
See you next week.